Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the first of our two extraordinary council meetings tonight, one at 5 o'clock and one later on at 7 o'clock. We're here to really discuss the two items that we didn't get through at our previous meeting, and hopefully once again remember that you are live on YouTube. It is being recorded. You've all clicked the button on that, and if that is a classic that the telephone rings, I think somebody else will answer that. I beg your pardon, just as we start. The perils of live debate and things like that. So we will first of all go for apologies. Simon, if you've got the apologies, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just two at the moment from Councillor McDonough and also now Councillor Pawley as well.
Chair, can I come in there? I've got an apology from Rob Archer, Councillor Archer as well.
Okay.
He probably can't make this meeting, but he will make the 7 o'clock meeting.
Okay, so that's three apologies on
Chair,
record.
I'd like to table an apology for Councillor Mark Salt.
Oh, right, 4 apologies on record. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Well, obviously we now have to have the roll call just to check that we can hear, and so everyone. So remember to unmute yourself when it comes up. Your name alphabetically. Simon, please.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allison.
Here.
Councillor Atkin.
Here.
Bright.
Yeah.
Fleur.
Here.
Bull.
Here.
Martin Burfoot.
Here.
Sue Burfoot.
Here.
Buttle.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Cruz. Councillor Cruz.
Come back to him.
I think he's just arrived actually in the meeting.
Okay. Is Councillor Cruz there? Are you receiving us? We'll go on to
I'm here.
Super. Okay, carry on, please.
Okay, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Elliott. Do you have Councillor Elliott at all? Okay.
No, come back.
Fitzherbert.
Here, present.
Flitter.
Here.
Froggatt.
Here.
Furness.
Here.
Gamble.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hobson.
Here.
Hughes.
Yes.
Lees.
Here.
Tony Morley.
Here.
Michelle Morley.
Present.
O'Brien.
Yes, here.
Purdy.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Raw. Councillor Raw.
Okay, come back.
Yep. Rose. Councillor Rose.
Here.
Thank you. Where are we? Shirley. Slack.
Here.
Statham.
Here.
Sutton.
Here.
Swindle. Councillor Swindle. No.
Come back to him.
And Wayne.
Here.
And Wakeman.
Here.
So I think that was
Apart from
it.
apologies, Chair, sorry, it's just Councillors Elliott, Raw and Swindle absent.
Right, okay. Right, thank you very much. Right, public participation, there is none. Interest, I haven't had any tabled. Are there any interests from anybody? No, thank you. Well, then we'll get on to the meat of the business in this particular meeting. So item 4, COVID-19, the Derbyshire Dales Economic Recovery Plan. Steve Cates, please. If you'll go on mute, please, Dr. Steve.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I'm aware that I'm competing with the Prime Minister at the moment, who's making an announcement about vaccinations. So if you can bear with me for a few minutes, I'm sure that what he has to say will still be there. Chairman, with your permission, I'm going to share my screen and share one or two slides, if I may. Hopefully, you will be able to see that. If you can't, then please scream at me. That all looks good, fantastic. So, about economic recovery for the Derbyshire Dales, it's in the context of the COVID situation that we're now in. Certainly, most of you, if not all of you, will know someone who's affected by the economic downturn, as well as increasingly by the other impacts of COVID. And so the time to start planning for that economic recovery is now. It's perhaps a key moment for the district council. It presents some challenges, but also some opportunities for us as well. So, why have a Derbyshire Dales recovery plan? Well, you know, the job losses are clear. There's some details in the report, and as we've now entered a second lockdown, those figures will be quite rapidly out of date, I'm sure. It's a tough time for businesses regardless. In the sectors that have been required to close, certainly, that includes the visitor economy, but others as well. The government recognises that by extending the furlough scheme now to March. But that comes on top of the historically low wages that we have in the Derbyshire Dales. And the graph that's at the bottom of this slide shows, if it's legible, that only over the last year, really, but the fact that wages in Britain as a whole, which is the green line at the top, are historically much higher than those on offer for jobs in the Derbyshire Dales. The Matlock line is the red line, and the blue line at the bottom is the Ashbourne line. So that's something that we've talked about many times, but it is a historic position that wages in the Derbyshire Dales are lower. And the council has been reacting to COVID during this period, as members know. And in the first lockdown period, we paid out some £33 million worth of grants to small businesses to help them survive the lockdown. But that was to help them survive, not to help recovery afterwards. And as members may know, we've got a second round of grants to be paid out over the coming month or so for the second lockdown as well. And much as the first grant sort of tied up a lot of the council to administer and pay those grants out, it's likely that the second's going to happen with the current round of grants as well. So we need to work towards recovery, but actually the Derbyshire Dales isn't in too bad a place compared to some districts. As you know, manufacturing is our biggest employment sector, and that has done, relatively speaking, relatively well during the pandemic. It's the sector that provides the better skilled and better paid jobs, but it's also done relatively well. Speaking to manufacturing businesses a month or so ago, a lot of them had pretty full order books and were looking to invest. So the fact that we've got a fairly high concentration of manufacturing actually supports the Derbyshire Dales in that regard. Another area where we're perhaps in a better position is that we've got smaller towns than our surrounding districts, and certainly than our surrounding cities. The smaller towns are certainly hurt by COVID, there's no doubt about that, but perhaps less so than some of the larger towns. There's an announcement that's come out in the last few days showing that the independent retail sector has suffered closures of about 0.5%. When you compare that to 2.5% for the big chains, it's certainly in a less bad position. Can't call it a positive position, but a less bad position. So we are starting off in a good position in some respects. And whilst the impact of COVID is undoubtedly large, the fact that Derbyshire Dales has got smaller towns and a manufacturing preponderance is perhaps putting us in a better position to plan for recovery. So what is our recovery plan? Well, it is to grow those manufacturing and engineering and green jobs as well. To do that, though, we do need to provide sites for those businesses to expand. And that's going to be the basis of the recovery plan that we're putting to you. Town centre regeneration is also there. But feeding into budget setting is partly why we're bringing this now, because we've got budget reports coming up later on this month. and reports on the Bakewell Road scheme as well coming later on this month. So one of the reasons for bringing this report now is to make sure that we're setting off in the right place to feed those budget decisions, the local plan decisions, and other things that are coming to you shortly. The recovery plan has been developed. I'm not going to go into the detail of it now, but it has been developed with our partners. It's supported by the County Council. It's supported by the D2N2 Local Enterprise Partnership. And the priorities that are in this recovery plan that's in front of you have fed into the Derbyshire Economic Partnership's recovery strategy as well. But there's some things in there that we put forward that are now featuring in the Derbyshire Economic Plan, which is good to know. So the priorities in the recovery plan are then is investing resources in regenerating those houses and employment sites. Ashbourne Business Park is our immediate priority, and as members may know, work started there at the end of last month. The initial work on the highways, the roundabout construction did start last month, which is really, really good news for the district. The Bakewell Road site in Matlock is going to come to members later this month as well, but reinvesting there is important as a town centre initiative. And my team is also going to need some resources, really, some investment in skills, the right skills to help move our brownfield sites forward. I know it's important to members to move forward brownfield sites ahead of greenfield sites. That's important to the council as a whole. That's important to me and my team too. So we need to put the resources behind doing that. Now, the recovery plan that's in detail in the text, it's got the three sectors in that are mentioned at the bottom of this slide: manufacturing that were mentioned, the knowledge-based industries, but also the green and environmental engineering sectors. And I must thank members for their proposing that be included, and officers are certainly happy to include that in the plan. There's a lot of detail in there, Chairman, which I'm not going to go into in detail. One thing that I will mention, though, is the Shop Appy scheme, which is a brand name for a scheme which is designed to support independent businesses. Essentially, what it's going to do when it goes live is to provide an online platform for ordering and delivery for those local businesses, to put them, if you like, on a par with the Amazons of this world, so that hopefully local independent businesses will be able to get orders from people in the same way that they could do click and collect or click and deliver for Amazon or Marks and Spencers or what have you. Hopefully it puts them on more of a level playing field for those as well. And that's a partnership scheme that's been led by the County Council. It's in the Derbyshire Economic Partnership Plan, which is why it's got DEP next to it, as of some of these other points as well. But it's one that we're hoping to get up and running by Christmas, along with our partners. It's one that, again, we're pleased to say includes the whole of the district. It includes not just the market towns, but also the rural areas as well. And that's something that we're quite pleased about, along with our partners. So just to finish off, Chairman, before any questions, it's really up to us as a district council. Although we're working with our partners, the only council that's focusing on the Derbyshire Dales primarily is us. So it's up to us to take the lead, and I hope members will join us tonight in doing that. And I do think we're starting from a relatively good place in the Derbyshire Dales. We've got strong businesses already and a good economic sector. And you know, industry has got a 1,000+ year heritage in the Derbyshire Dales, not just with the quarrying and lead mining, but also more recently, in the last few hundred years, the Industrial Revolution, which in some respects started in the Derbyshire Dales. So it's a challenging task, but I think it's a good opportunity. And also I think that the COVID recovery time is exactly the right time to be doing that. So, Chairman, I will de-share this and then over to you for any questions. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Purdy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thanks very much, Steve, and commend you and your team for this excellent document and the work that you're doing. As Steve says, this fits in nicely with the collaborative approach with Derbyshire County Council and D2N2. And we are pressing D2N2 for monies for the Bakewell Road scheme, which I hope members can support. I think in these very challenging times, it's right that this authority takes the lead in the economic recovery. One of the biggest impacts, of course, in the pandemic is the impact upon our economy. So I think it's only right that members support this, and therefore I'm happy to move the recommendations from 1 to 7, Chair, and hope that members can support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Councillor Ratcliffe.
Right, thank you, Chair. Councillor Purdy has made some very good introductory remarks there and some general statements. But I want to start with a question to you, Chair, if I may, to begin with. And then I have some questions to the author of this report, Steve Capes, that I hope won't be too challenging for him. First of all, I just want to ask you, Chair, I would feel much easier in my mind if I could have your agreement that the recommendations here could be taken separately. This is a very detailed and sophisticated report. Recommendation 7, for example, is of a completely different order to that of 4. In fact, I think it's pretty fair to say that recommendation 7 has actually been almost prior approved. I don't think anybody would be against that, but there are others I think that would be more contentious. So I'd like to have your advice on my question to begin with.
I wasn't going to take them all separately. No, I wasn't, Councillor Ratcliffe. Sorry.
So we're going to vote for these en bloc.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not happy about that, but I'll move on.
Okay.
Right, over to you, Steve, if I may. I apologise for not having sent these out in advance, but there we are. My first question is about something of a perennial. We have for a number of years been attempting to put into our development plans this principle of brownfield over greenfield, but it always comes down to remediation costs. That's always been the hurdle that we need to get over. At one point, we felt that money was going to come via the government. It appears not to be so. Now, of course, we've got the prospect of monies through Section 106 being much more difficult to obtain through the changes to planning system. What do you feel realistically will be the chance of us obtaining external funding to produce this remediation, given that it's extremely necessary in many instances?
Councillor Ratcliffe makes a good point there, Chairman, and I think I'd say perhaps two things in that regard. One is that if the district council, as is recommended tonight, prioritises and puts resources itself into dealing with these brownfield sites, that makes it more likely that other people are going to get behind us and support us in that endeavour, including in funding. Generally, what the LEP and others would say is, if they can see that the council's got its backing and giving its full support and is really serious about things, then they're more likely to join in too. So I think that by putting its own weight behind things, that will help others to come on board. The other point is that Homes England, a government agency who do work on this with us, have over the last year or so been a lot more positive about working with us and putting their funds towards some of our difficult sites as well. And Councillor Ratcliffe is familiar with those in Wirksworth. And Homes England have, for instance, with regard to a couple of the sites there where together there's more than 800 homes potentially that could be developed along with employment land, that's of a scale that certainly interests them. So those conversations can happen and are happening. I think we've got a more open door to people like Homes England and the LEP now than we would have had in years gone by. But there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right, thank you, Steve. I'll move to my next one, if I may. Currently, unemployment across Derbyshire Dales has certainly increased, such that low-paid jobs are much sought after. Should we emerge on the bright side of this COVID crisis, do you have the confidence that we will have an emerging, and to use a well-known phrase, an oven-ready workforce, ready and able to step into high-skilled jobs? Have you had any dialogue or assessment provided by universities and colleges that in fact we are moving to that more confident position?
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Ratcliffe. I think Councillor Ratcliffe is right in that the mix of jobs is important, and although there'll be perhaps more low-skilled jobs to start with, we certainly want to still work towards more higher-skilled jobs in the longer term. In terms of the workforce, the Derbyshire Dales is in the fortunate position that we have really good schools that produce really skilled and well-qualified people, and not all parts of the world are in that position, but the Derbyshire Dales does do well. We have a lot of young and not so young people with good qualifications. And in that regard, talking to not so much the universities, but talking to the LEP and talking to the county council, who've got their skills programme as well, they would say their areas of concern in the county and in the region aren't the Derbyshire Dales, they're other parts of the district. So I think that's perhaps another area where we're starting off in a relatively good position.
Okay, my third question, Steve, bear with me, is in my own ward, I think preparations have already been laid, as it were, for economic recovery. But given the control over planning by the Peak District National Park, do you not feel that we could meet challenges over commercial development in the northern sector?
Chairman, the Peak Park does of course have strict planning laws, or planning policies, but equally there are employment sites designated within the national park, and the Bakewell Riverside site is a site that the National Park Authority themselves support. It's certainly part of their planning policies, and of course it's an area that's attracted development funding from the local enterprise partnership. So there are perhaps more within Bakewell than elsewhere, but there are sites for employment within the national park. It's not spread to the same extent elsewhere, but I think the National Park Authority is certainly aware of the need to grow, again, a mix of jobs, and there are sites to do it. And Bakewell Riverside, and also the sites across the road from there in Bakewell are good examples of good quality employment in the national park.
Thank you, Steve. And finally, and I have alluded to this before in my question to the chair, I think it's been accepted that recommendation 4 and its content has largely been accepted as a very desirable local initiative with possible wider benefits. But current economic trends, I think, have cast some doubt about the detail here. Given the workshop planned for the 12th, do you not feel that somehow we're being a bit preemptory this evening?
Chairman, this is anything that was discussed on the capital programme will be discussed at the capital programme meeting at the council in November. So what all we're asking for you to do today is to put it forward to that meeting to go into the plan to be discussed by council in November.
I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Tony Morley next, please. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, question for Steve.
And are you sorry, Tony, are you seconding as well?
Yeah, I'm going to second it, Chair. I think it's a great, as is, report seconded as written, but I want a bit of clarification on something which Steve just mentioned. So it's seconded, yes, Chair. Online shopping, Shop Appy. you mentioned. Looks like being the future. I'm sure Jeff Bezos, who ironically looks remarkably like you, Dr. Capes. He would probably agree with me, Jeff, the online shopping. It's already live in Kendal, Todmorden, Northallerton, as well as areas like Putney. Have we anything to learn from other similarly configured rural areas, or are we going to start from scratch? Thanks, Steve.
Chairman, I think the fact that it's live in a mixture of places across the country is a good thing, and certainly when the county council or the county consortium, if you like, that helped procure Shop Happy, that was an important factor that they bore in mind. So it is an experienced area, and I think one of the things that through discussion with members here has raised is that being able to work in rural areas as well as the towns is a key point for the Derbyshire Dales. And certainly, well, other members will know more than me, but in the Hope Valley, they're very well advanced in coming up with a scheme that's going to work with Shop Happy and use it for exactly those reasons. I'm not sure Jeff Bezos is quite quaking in his boots yet, but hopefully he will be soon.
That's my Steve. Yes, thank you very much. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Dr. Capes.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Flitter next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a question for Steve, because I was looking for something a little bit different in this recovery plan. And we talk about investment and reinvestment, but we also talk about reshaping regeneration services, which may give a little input. But I'd like just to ask him, is he confident that we will be able to bring not high skill, but higher paid jobs to the rest of Derbyshire Dales apart from Ashbourne? And I say that because Ashbourne is very lucky, because it's got the infrastructure around it of Stoke-on-Trent, Derby, the East Midlands, the M1, and Chesterfield is the turning point. If you're dealing with Europe and the ports, Chesterfield is the turnaround area where if you go north of that, you've got an extra day on the workload, and many people suffer and they have to relocate into northeast Derbyshire. So I'm really looking for the confidence of the rest of Derbyshire Dales, such as Wirksworth, Ashbourne and Bakewell, getting those higher paid jobs, because we do rely on visitors and tourist trade. Without that, we would be in trouble. But it would be nice with all this extra housing that we're going to get in the future. It's going to follow with proper jobs that people can afford the high prices for the homes. So what confidence is there, Steve? And can you just recap on reshaping our regeneration services?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Flitter, and agree absolutely that this is something that needs to be spread across the whole district, not just in one area. I mean, Ashbourne is a big oven ready, to use that phrase again, site which is coming ahead. But that's, for one type of perhaps businesses in buildings, but we've got better paid jobs across the whole district as well. I mean, a lot of the economy of the district is related to the supply chain for quarrying. Quarrying is one of our best paid sectors actually in the district, not just with the quarrying jobs itself, but the supply chain, including haulage. The lorry drivers are skilled and well paid. And that's across the whole district, perhaps less so in Ashbourne, but more so in Wirksworth and the north. Longcliffe is still one of our biggest employers, for instance. So I think that there are opportunities across the whole district, and the food and drink businesses, which are perhaps some of them more in the Bakewell area, again, provide some of those better paid jobs as well. So yes, it's very much our intention that those benefits go across the whole district. And you put the nail on the head, in order to be able to afford those the houses in the Derbyshire Dales which are higher priced. We do need local people to get those higher paid jobs. So absolutely with Councillor Flitter on that. But also echoing your other point that visitor economy jobs are also important too. They're a key part of our district. Those jobs might not be so well paid, but they are going to stay with us, and rightly too. We just want to be able to offer a variety to people. So whatever suits them, it's not just visitor economy. There's other jobs as well. And I can't remember your second question, Councillor Flitter. Sorry.
Oh, nor can I now, Steve.
I believe, Chair, it was about the regeneration in the office.
Good point. Thanks, Councillor Purdy. Yes, thank you for saving us both. So what we're looking to do is to get more skills in terms of the if you like, the property, the commercial skills to help with the work with developers on getting these brownfield and other development sites for housing and employment forward. Those take specialist skills that people with perhaps surveying backgrounds and property backgrounds have. We haven't got that in the council, or those that we have are just devoted to our own property. We haven't got any people with the skills in the wider commercial property market in terms of bringing sites forward. We're used to working with people like that through our planning system and our economic development system, but we don't have people in-house who can help drive that for us. And that's what we feel we need in order to help bring these sites ahead more quickly than they would otherwise. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Allison next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just got a question about the Matlock Bakewell Road redevelopment scheme. Has that been subject to a D2N2 bid before? And basically, why was that unsuccessful at that time? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allison. And yes, it has been subject to a D2N2 bid. It's been subject to a DEFRA bid. It's also been subject to when there was a towns funding bid that the government allowed us to. So it's been around 3 rounds of bids. And broadly speaking, the reason why it doesn't score top on those bids is because it doesn't create enough jobs for them. So the fact that it's of strategic importance to Matlock, which it certainly is of immense strategic importance to Matlock, we believe, doesn't score so highly in the scoring mechanisms for those government funding schemes. It's the numbers of jobs created which it doesn't score so highly. It will create perhaps a dozen or so jobs, but in terms of the government schemes, they will feel they get more bang for their bucks from the types of industrial developments and housing developments that happen elsewhere. So it's not that it's a poor scheme; it just doesn't score highly enough in job creation, and that's due to the way that the government has set its funding scheme targets. It's recently, Councillor Allison, gone to D2N2 again, and it scored really well. It scored 59 points. 61 was the threshold for it going forward. So it did well, but not quite well enough.
So we're looking at for £800,000 of investment, creating about 12 jobs then?
Creating about 12 direct jobs within Matlock, but in terms of the strategic significance to the town centre, in terms of the footfall it brings and the benefit that will bring to other retailers, and in terms of the post-COVID recovery, the fact that leisure, in terms of broadening the appeal of the town centre, is really important. It's important in that regard too. What we are going to do on Bakewell Road, Councillor Allison, is have a workshop for members specifically on that, and with the chairman's agreement, a council meeting specifically on that topic as well. So there'll be a full business case and a more detailed presentation on that specific topic to come before members, all prior to the council meeting in the capital programme, which was alluded to earlier on the 26th. So there'll be 2 opportunities where we'll come to members with more details on that scheme.
Okay, thank you. So within the business case, there will be some more sort of measures of what improvement it will bring to Matlock Town Centre then?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Allison. We've had a full business case done by, well, the sorts of commercial consultants, I suppose, I was alluding to earlier. And as I say, it's one that's been accepted by D2N2. It just didn't score quite high enough on their funding criteria. The other problem with D2N2, of course, is the fact they actually haven't got any additional money at the moment for any schemes, but that's a side issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Who have I got next? I've got Councillor Buckler. I've lost you.
I'm still here.
Great. Okay, got you. You're not on my screen. Go ahead.
I've got a question about looking at, you've said about, again for Steve, you've said about the skills that traditionally we've had and the industries which we've traditionally had in the Dales. Can you say what experience we've got of developing alternative businesses within the Dales? You've mentioned, on your slide, you mentioned about the knowledge economy and, how with changes to fibre broadband, is there what capacity is there for us to start looking to recruit in other industries? Because I have some concerns about the levels of quarrying that, for example, there are in my ward and across the district. So it would be good to start looking at new jobs if those sort of industries start to tail off.
Councillor Buckler makes some very good points there, and the digital economy, the knowledge-based economy, should be an area where the Derbyshire Dales thrives. It's a great place for people to work, people who can work from home or from small workshop, office space, conversion type premises. It should be ideal. The only thing that's been holding us back really in that regard has been the less than perfect broadband. The County Council are certainly with us with their Digital Derbyshire ambitions on there, and it certainly features in the DEP economic strategy as well as that of D2N2. So if that broadband can be improved, and it's something where I think I would regret that it hasn't been improved as quickly in the Derbyshire Dales as it has been in some of our surrounding areas over the last 10 years. That is a pity, but it means that we're now in a place where if it can be improved, I think that could be of enormous benefit to the Derbyshire Dales. It's exactly the sort of business that we would like to see, and a lot of those digital businesses are some of those better paying, better skilled ones too. So Councillor Buckler is right, and the sorts of environments and the sorts of premises that we have in the Derbyshire Dales are ideal for that sort of
And just sort of following up to that, what can we do to develop those industries?
Well, we can do a couple of things. I think one is to, as I say, work with partners to try and improve broadband, and I think we're pushing at an open door there now. The other is to do one of the things that's in the economic plan today, which is to do a bit more promotion of the Derbyshire Dales as a place open for business and a place that promotes the quality of life and the quality of business, both of which are very strong in the Derbyshire Dales. In the economic recovery plan, we do talk about starting a Derbyshire Dales Open for Business campaign. And we have, in fact, recently started on doing some videos and some recording to put behind that. We've got a Derbyshire-based marketing firm behind us now, relatively small budget, to do some small-scale videography and so on to try and promote the area to those sorts and other sorts of business as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, just to inform you that Councillors Salt and Raw have entered the meeting, but as per our rules of procedure, they will not be able to vote. Councillor Hughes, please, next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up really on Councillor Flitter and Councillor Buckler's points. Steve, I thought the report that you produced was very good, and sort of thing that we needed, and focused on the sorts of development we need to bring up the salary levels within Derbyshire Dales. And I think we all recognise that Matlock in particular has focused more on perhaps on housing and less on industrial other sectors development in the last local plan. But there are brownfield sites in Matlock, and indeed in the Matlock St Giles ward. And I would say Matlock St Giles and Tansley ward, because one of the biggest brownfield sites is actually in Tansley. And I'd just like to just draw that to your attention, if that's possible, Steve, as I have done in the past. Turning to Councillor Butler's point, have we developed relationships with any universities in the area through D2N2 or with Sheffield University or even Manchester UMIST, for example, or what University of Manchester as it now is? Because it seems to me that it's through universities that you will have access to the people who want to set up knowledge-based industries, the sort that we might be able to attract to some of the more difficult locations within Derbyshire Dales, and where Derbyshire Dales has reasonable car access. It doesn't have good truck access. So my question really is, have we talked to the universities? Are we going to talk to the universities in the area? And are we talking to the sector leaders in the area, the large IT companies, the pharmaceutical companies that may be able to bring their laboratories to facilities in Derbyshire Dales, where there isn't good road access, but it's sufficient for people to come in? Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Councillor Hughes, and yes, the brownfield sites in the central area are on the agenda. Thank you. With regard to the digital, we haven't had conversations with the universities directly, but would be happy to do so. So I think that's a point we'll take away from today as something we can follow up in future. So thank you for that suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to just make a couple of comments. I'm especially pleased to note the joint team with the council who worked together so hard under a lot of time pressures and other pressures, and continue to do so during this second lockdown, delivering this amazing amount of grants to the businesses in the Dales. We have to look post-COVID with some optimism towards a brighter future, and I will be supporting all the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wayne, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've spoke to Mr. Capes this afternoon for a few minutes about this, and I just want to raise one or two issues if I can. As being somebody who's only been doing this for 18 months and not coming from an economic background, basically this takes more reading than other things. But I raised an issue with him earlier on about the leader scheme, because it seems to me that we're losing out, and I'm sure Councillor Purdy has been making representations via the MP to central government, but we shouldn't really be suffering as a result of the priorities and the actual rationale set by central government. The leader scheme seems to be have been a very good thing in the past, and I would encourage us to be getting that back on board. The other thing that I would like to mention before I just ask a couple of questions, if I may, if the new recruitment of staff are going to encourage us to take on brownfield sites, so we're not carving up greenfield sites, I welcome that, because at the end of the day, we have in the Peak Park, they are putting forward a new initiative in relation to enhancing their area and doing green, wildflower meadows and things like that to improve their amenity up there. But down here, we're seem prepared to carve up a rather large site, which is exactly the same, which is there functioning as it is a carbon sink at the present time. The questions that I would like to ask is, do Bakewell, the residents of Bakewell on the actual graph at page 8, they're not represented. Do people in Bakewell not get any salaries? Because it just seems that we've got Ashbourne and Matlock salaries on there, but no Bakewell. I presume they do come under the economic plan. Could we find out why that is, please? The second thing that I did allude to earlier on was terminology. Some people, we need to realise that some people are happy with low-skilled jobs. Some people are happy to go to work for a minimum wage because it suits their lifestyles and their abilities. So I don't particularly welcome terminology such as low-skilled and basic. I know the government words, but at the end of the day, it devalues people. So I would like, let us take a step above and let's use better terminology, because anybody reading this report may feel somewhat devalued. The final thing I would like to ask in relation to the shop appy, which seems a very good initiative. What consultation have we taken as a council for the people in our market towns and larger villages? Have we consulted with them? Have we sought their views on this? Or are we just going to impose it upon them? Thank you very much.
Steve. 3 questions, Steve.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks, Councillor Wayne. And with regard to the leader scheme and its replacement, I can assure you that both Councillor Purdy and Councillor Rose before him were very much strong advocates for the leader scheme, and indeed it's something that we are continuing to lobby for, a scheme that, in relation to Councillor Allison's points earlier, that recognises the needs of rural areas and perhaps doesn't weight funding decisions so much in favour of the towns and cities. The brownfield land sites that you mention are key, and it's something we do want to work on. What I would say to all members, don't think it's easy. Just by putting getting the right skills in place isn't going to suddenly magic our ability to develop the brownfield sites. They are hide sites, as Councillor Ratcliffe said earlier, but we will have a much better chance if we put the right resources behind it. So jobs, Bakewell. Councillor Wayne's right, Bakewell's not mentioned. The only reason it's not on that graph is that's a graph it's based on the numbers of jobs advertised. There's been plenty of jobs advertised in Matlock and Ashbourne, Bakewell rather fewer. So there is a graph for Bakewell, but because there's so few jobs, relatively speaking, advertised in Bakewell, it's not a reliable figure. Essentially, where you've got fairly steady lines for Matlock and Ashbourne, for Bakewell, the line jumps all over the place because there's the numbers of jobs involved is so small. Low skilled jobs, entirely take your point on that, Councillor Wayne, and apologies and thank you for grappling with the terminology as well. It is important, as I said earlier, that we have jobs for all people in the Derbyshire Dales. I think my only concern with this initiative is to make sure we have a wider range of jobs. So it's not just the low skilled jobs, important though they are, we have a wide range of jobs so that everyone can benefit in the Dales. And in terms of shop appy, no, that hasn't been consulted on with local residents, but any business who wants to join it can, any business who doesn't want to join it doesn't have to. It's entirely voluntary, but then I do know where it has been adopted, it has proven successful. I hope it does in the Derbyshire Dales, and it'll be down to people using it as they want to use it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got Councillor O'Brien next, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's much in this report that I welcome and very strongly support. On the put some members' minds at rest on the shop appy scheme. I don't think many of you are able to watch Look North here, are you? From Leeds. But if you were watching, if you're able to, I don't know whether Chris Furness you did on Friday evening. There was quite a lengthy feature on the shop appy scheme in the Hope Valley, celebrating its launch and what it entails. And it's benefiting. It's up and running now, and retail premises in Bradwell, Hathersage, and Grindleford are already signed up to the scheme. It's driven actually by the community, so I think that is a feather in the cap of Derbyshire Dales for pushing that forward as the first scheme in the county. I do very much welcome the emphasis in the report on moving towards facilitating the development and unlocking of brownfield sites throughout the district. And I also welcome the acknowledgement that this isn't just restricted to outside the national park, because there are a number of sites, both not just in Bakewell on the Riverside Park, but in Tideswell, for example, and smaller brownfield development opportunities in many of the other villages, including Hallisage. And I do hope that members will have the opportunity to become involved over the next 12 months in how we take this new initiative forward. But I very much welcome that. Some things I'm less strongly supportive of. I do think that the omission of any specific reference to skills development is perhaps a loss to the recovery plan. I think, as others have mentioned, constructing a lovely new roundabout on the A52 is fine, and opening up the development land in Ashbourne is great. But if you don't have the skills development to go alongside that, it reduces the chance of it actually delivering what we all hope it will do. So I do think that's something of an admission. The other point I want to make is that when we went on our induction day 18 months ago, officers were very keen to take us to the Heights of Abraham, and we celebrated there the success of one of our leading tourist industries. I do find how do I want to phrase this, the feeling in the report that the visitor economy, the hospitality sector, is somehow less important to us. I find that really disappointing. Just some statistics. If you look at Bakewell, and if you look at Hallisage and Eam, there's 8% of the workforce are employed in manufacturing. Something like 2.5%, 2.5 times that are employed in the tourism and the hospitality industry. Now, any idea that somehow we're going to change that radically through an economic plan, a recovery plan, which now replaces those hardworking people in those sectors with skilled manufacturing, I think is not realistic. So to enable me to support fully this plan, I would like to see one of the action points relating to supporting the development of added value and green tourism industries. I think that's an acknowledgement of the continued importance of that sector in much of the district. The other aspect of the report I find myself not really able to support at this stage is recommendation 3, which is to allow an additional £50,000 of expenditure between now and the end of March, without any detail of what that expenditure may be. We do seem to be moving into a situation where money is being thrown around all over the place at the moment by the council. But when Serco and Freedom Leisure come to us for additional funding, then we have a very detailed business case presented to us as to what that additional money is needed for, and we look at it in detail and we agree to it or we don't agree to it. I do think if the council officers are looking for additional financial support, then we should expect the same level of detail from them as we do from our private sector partners.
Okay, Steve.
So there's minor reservations. Okay. I do endorse much of the report.
Okay, Steve.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Just to briefly say that on skills development, as I think Councillor Purdy has posted, we are part of the Derbyshire Economic Partnership. They have now produced their skills and an education strategy for post-COVID, and that's something that we do support and will seek to support and be part of that. With regard to the visitor economy, added value in the visitor economy is already part of our economic plan, and we're not going to stop that. It's certainly very much the council's ambition to get the best value we can out of the visitor economy and improve that by getting more staying visitors, more high value attractions such as the Heights of Abraham, which will create better quality jobs. I think the one thing I'm conscious of is that visitor economy in Derbyshire has a very strong voice. It has a very articulate and passionate board. Councillor Mrs. Morley is our representative on that board, and their managing director and indeed the leader of the county council are very vocal about the visitor economy. So not to take away anything from that, but what we don't really have is someone being vocal about the industrial sector, the manufacturing and engineering sectors in the Derbyshire Dale. So that's why that gets a high priority or a higher profile in this report. So it's not to take away from what we do on the visitor economy, it's to try and raise the profile of some of the other things that we do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Slack, please, and then Martin Burford. Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve, for a very, very good report. Over the years, Ashburn has been very fortunate that it's had the airfield after the war years, and it's a perfect development site, and it's on the A52, and it's been absolutely perfect. If we are going to go for brownfield sites, we've got to get them in the right place. Infrastructure and transport are very important.
Oh, Councillor Slack, 1 second. Just keep your hands still if you can, because there's a bit of interference. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, don't worry, it's difficult.
You put me off its stride.
You're talking about the airfield.
Yeah, the airfield. Yeah, and it's been a great success. And we look in the district for similar ones. The quarry sites, the old quarry sites are ideal, aren't they, really, for the same development. But I'm looking to the future now. I'm looking to green initiatives, green products being built. In the Dales, we've got lots of small engineering firms which have provided companies like Rolls-Royce and other big companies with component parts. And they're very skillful, actually. Some of a friend of mine, he's got a business making component parts for Rolls-Royce. And they're very skillful little firms, and they need help and advice for the future. And the future is going to be in green energy. Hydrogen is going to come over the next 20 or 30 years, and more electricity as oil declines and natural gas will decline. We'll see more of these green initiatives coming forward. And that's probably an area we ought really to be concentrating on to get small businesses and give them maximum support if they're in the green energy industry, because that's ones who will succeed over the long term. So, Steve, is there a policy for green energy?
Councillor Slack is absolutely right, and those small engineering and manufacturing businesses are the lifeblood of the Derbyshire Dales. As far as D2N2 is concerned, the local enterprise partnership, the moving forward to green engineering and green manufacturing and green energy is a priority for them. I think the key thing for us as a district is to make sure that translates to the smaller businesses, not just the big ones. So it is a priority. I think the action for us as a council is to make sure that translates to exactly those smaller firms that Councillor Slatt has mentioned.
I've just one other question, if you can.
Okay.
Just a moment. In regard to the development at Matlock, I'm all supportive for the development at Matlock, but we have seen, in not just in Matlock, in shops right through the England, Britain, UK, a decline in shop as online shopping becomes more and more popular, and with that the COVID, it's been increased, so pushed forward again. And some of these never come back again. Some of the shops will close in town centres. The business has gone to online, and they'll never really come back again. I think in future we've got to look to businesses that are not entirely reliant on shopping online. There's other businesses such as antiques and curios and interesting shops where you can wander about and look at different interesting things where you can't online. We've got to look to shops of that kind. And also cinema in town centres is a good thing because more people are going out to cinemas. I know it's a nighttime economy, but it's still economy. And also the tourist economy, it'll always be with us, a tourist economy, because it's a beautiful, we've got it set for a beautiful area, Derbyshire Dales, and people will always come into the Derbyshire Dales. But unfortunately, as we all know, the jobs are very low paid, and it's a shame really, because they shouldn't be really, I think, but that's how the situation is. So when we do come to develop the town centres, we have to look to shops which are going to be sustainable over the long period of time. You know, it's going to change. Shops and town centres are enormously. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Councillor Slack, and you're quite right. It's broadening the appeal of town centres beyond the traditional retail. Is exactly what we're trying to do with the Bakewell Road development, getting a cinema there, which will help not just the nighttime economy but also the daytime economy. They'd intend to show screenings during the day as well. So it's a reason for people to come into town, and that will support the retailers as well. The good thing about Matlock and the other Derbyshire Dales town is because we've got more independent shops of the type that you mentioned, they're perhaps not quite so susceptible to the downturn and the online shopping that some shops are. But by giving them things like Shop Appy and providing other reasons for people to come into town, we can hopefully help them thrive, not just survive.
Thank you. Councillor Martin Burford.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions, but prior to that, I'd like to welcome this generally excellent report by Steve, and welcome the recommendations. In fact, I'll just probably briefly endorse what Councillor O'Brien said about recommendation 3 and the need for perhaps more detailed investigation of the £50,000 budget for officers that officers need to justify. But what I welcome in particular, items recommendation 4, in terms of £800,000 for Bakewell Road, and just to reassure members who are not familiar with Matlock, or particularly with the Bakewell Road site and the indoor market area, that was probably a mistake made by this council in the 1980s, early 1980s, when the supermarket scheme was and rooftop car park were approved, thereby producing what is a sort of a cavernous underground area, which has never been successful as an indoor market. It's dark and dank and very uninviting. So it's even though it was improved a few years ago, it's never been a success. So, and I'll also say that I've been involved in trying to upgrade this area and produce proposals for this area probably over the last 15 years now. And so I do know quite a lot about it. But it's this scheme that's proposed today, and we've had a briefing about, the Matlock members have had a briefing about it last week. It's only one small part really of what should be a comprehensive scheme for the whole of the Bakewell Road area. But unfortunately, regrettably, it's the refusal of one major landowner to even discuss it and participate at all in discussions about the future of that site that have held it up. And if you knew what the district council ownership was on that site, you realise that it wraps around this privately owned bit of the site. So that's something that needs to be addressed, I think, in the future. But this is obviously a very welcome first phase, I suppose, of the comprehensive scheme. And I hope it's a success, because it will bring, I think, when it's extended, it will bring far more jobs into the area. And part of it's going to be community space as well, which I think Matlock Community Vision have been asked to develop more and perhaps fund externally from different sources. But coming down to my two questions, I welcome the fact that we're going to be regenerating or taking on expertise on the council to help with the remediation and regeneration of brownfield sites. And I also noticed that three of those sites are in Matlock. That's Corder Quarry, Halldale Quarry and Bakewell Road, in fact. And I think Councillor Hughes alluded to the need to include Tansley Wood Mills in that as well, which is on the boundary of Matlock and Tansley, because that's been derelict for many, many years, despite various planning consents being discussed and partly approved. So that needs to, I think we need a push on that direction as well. But I just wonder just what is proposed for these sites in terms of the regeneration, in terms of remediation and the expertise that's expected. So can Steve answer that one, please?
Chairman, yes. I mean, well, we've talked about the Bakewell Road site, but in terms of Halldale Quarry and Corder Quarry, we've worked over recent years with colleagues in planning to ensure that although they are mixed use developments led by housing, that there is an element of employment use within both of those. So both the Halldale Quarry and the Corder Quarry proposals that have got, I think, at least a hectare each of employment use within them. Our role will be to try and bring those forward. Corder Quarry, as members know, has made a start after much effort by officers and members over many, well, I would say decades, certainly before my time. But that has made a start, which is positive. The Halldale Quarry site is harder. It's a bit more distance. It's a bit more constrained, but nevertheless, it is a key opportunity site within the area. So it'll be up to us and the new team that I'm seeking to create to work with the owners, to work with the developers, to work with people like Homes England and the LEP. If we can actually, instead of just talking about these sites, if we can put some impetus behind it, then these funders and partners will see that we're serious and are more likely to move forward with developing them in the way that we want. What we don't want is them to stay derelict for another 20 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just ask Stephen who agree with me that the Halldale Quarry site particularly needs to be, I welcome, obviously, there have been planning applications in the past, quite a lot of employment space, but does he agree with me that perhaps one of the key benefits there, in line with other discussions we've had recently, would be the need for nature conservation, the wildlife conservation aspects of that site, as it is long been closed as a quarry, and therefore it's been regenerated naturally over those many years. So I think the key areas of that which are visible from the opposite side of the valley need to be retained as such, and there could be key conservation sites that could attract visitors from all around the area.
Chair, both the Halldale and Corder Quarry sites have got conservation interest, and certainly the ones that the Corder Quarry proposals more developed, and they, as I think members have seen, have got conservation elements within them, and we'd obviously need to see that Halldale Quarry develops in a similar manner as far as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gamble, and then I've got Councillor Finesse. Councillor Gamble, please.
Thank you, Chair. Right, generally I agree with a lot of the comments that have been said. I mean, this is a really good report in terms of what the way it's looked at the area, and it identified a lot of problems with the area and where we need to expand. I suppose really what I'd like is a little, again, Councillor O'Brien's comments. Really, are members going to be fully involved in this and looking at the projects and looking at their areas in terms of what areas could be looked at and where they, and particularly within the national park, again, just to reiterate, really, we are a tourist economy that's going to stay, and I welcome any movements that can be made to widen out the sort of types of jobs that's going to be available, and I think that'll be a really great thing. And so, first question really is on broadband. I mean, I have an area in my ward which I've been working. I know there's been a lot of work in the last year to get this, and we still haven't really got anywhere, and funding seems to be a big drawback to this. So we've got villages where not only have you got very, very poor broadband, you've got no phone reception because people are in stone houses. I think so. Can ask what the district council get involved with those communities and try and move that forward for them, because that would be really good. And then the other thing really is the reskilling. I think as well as welcome the move to go and contact universities and things, but also could I say and push the case for further education colleges. If we're going to move into green engineering and things, we're going to need people with engineering skills. We're going to need people with practical skills to be able to do this. And also, if we're going to move this new green infrastructure to smaller businesses, we need to be able to things like to get our local plumbers and things retrained in green energy so they know how to install heat, air source, ground source, and they need some sort of offer in front of them to help them do that. So hopefully can reassurance that something like that, sort of scheme like that, will go forward. Also, I have the same concerns about the recommendation 3, the 50,000. Yes, I would like to see more detail on what that's going to be about. And recommendation 4, can I just ask that when that does come back to council, we have a fully costed scheme, and if what seems to be the case is we're not going to get external funds from things like D2N2, where is the rest of the capital going to come from? And also, will we be assured we'll have in that full business case details of the extra income that's going to be happen, that it isn't just going to be that people will stop going to bars.
I think, Councillor Gamble, that will be one for whichever day we've got the briefing, the 12th, I think.
Yeah, can I just ask that will all be covered?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
And then I have another question, please, on the lack of information on income. In the national park, obviously there'd been no Bakewell info. Thank you for the clarification, actually, that the information that has been based on job applications. Can I ask that we actually start to do some sort of research and looking and into what the incomes people actually are? Can we use PAYE information? Can we use because what a lot of people around here might be having, say, 1 or 2 jobs. So just because something is advertised at a certain rate doesn't mean that's particularly what someone's living on. I think we could really do with maybe a little bit of more macro looking at how people are living and what their incomes are.
Okay, let's get Steve to answer those. Steve, thank you,
Thanks, Councillor Fitzherbert, and thanks, Councillor Gamble. It's always good to have comments from someone I know is involved in the small business community yourself. So it's helpful to have that. Reassurance, yes, the full business case will come to members on Bakewell Road, so all that information will be there then. You make good points about income information. There are income surveys that the government does. So the annual survey of hours and earnings, ASH, is the other incomes source that we use. And that paints a similar picture. So we've got those 2 sources. And you're right, the anecdotal information is that certainly, and it's typical of rural areas, that people do have multiple jobs in this area. And we don't have, if you like, formal information on that, but any information that members can provide is always helpful in that regard, because that's a case that I do keep making to people like the LEP, that you can look at those, the big stats, but that doesn't tell the whole story for somewhere like the Derbyshire Dales. With regard to FE colleges, we have in the past had good involvement with them, particularly in the rural sector. So things like Broomfield College and equivalents in the Staffordshire Moorlands. We have, with regard to skills training, had those links in the past. So we will ensure that happens again in the future. Broadband, it is a big issue, I know. What we can do as a district council is we're more than happy to facilitate links with the county council team who are leading on that. So if you or anyone else would like to talk to them about specific issues, we're really happy to get in touch and have, if need be, a joint meeting with them as well. I think the final thing I'd say to follow up your points, Councillor Gamble, is that, you know, our business support team, we haven't talked about that so much tonight, but we do have a really successful business advisor in the Derbyshire Dales who's very good at supporting businesses, all sorts of businesses, small businesses across the whole spectrum local business people with no employees, up to the slightly larger ones as well. And that's something that we have done very well in the Derbyshire Dales, we continue to do so. One of the things we're asking for in the DEP economic plan that the Derbyshire Dales has actually got put into that plan is something that Giles has worked up, which is a scheme to support new startup businesses post-COVID. So that's something that we are keen to build on as we move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Finesse, I said. Chris?
Getting muted. Sorry, I forgot to mute. Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question really for Steve is about brownfield sites. We've heard a lot of mention from members, you know, about sites here, there and everywhere. I mean, we've got down here a list of 6 strategic growth sites, which mostly, it seems, brownfield, I would guess. But have you got a list, Steve, of all the brownfield sites, including those that have been mentioned? I've heard Councillor O'Brien has mentioned the possibility of sites in the Peak District National Park. But our Director of Planning insists that there is only one brownfield site left now. There were 2, but Bradwell has now been developed. So it would be interesting if you got a complete list of these brownfield sites, Steve. And if so, if you could let us have it. Thank you.
Steve?
Chairman, the sites that are highlighted in this report are the same ones that were highlighted in the economic plan that went to members a year ago. They are largely brownfield, but not exclusively. But I think Councillor Furness has hit the nail on the head that they aren't perhaps the strategic sites. They're the ones that are slightly larger, the ones where we know there's space and where we can have an impact on trying to work on them. There are other sites in the Peak Park where we have had influence and worked on with others in the past. I mean, Councillor O'Brien mentioned Tideswell and Hathersage. There's both Hathersage Hall and the other Hathersage business site where we have worked on in the past with our business advisor and DEP and its forerunners, and in fact Giles in his previous job had a big role in getting them to come forward. So we do work in the Peak Park as well as across the whole district on a multitude of sites. But the ones that are mentioned in this report, as I say, are purely there because they are the strategic sites where we can perhaps have more impact. But we will continue to help businesses on the other sites too.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckler, I'm sorry, I didn't let him make his comments. Councillor Buckler, please. Steve.
Right,
Matthew, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm getting mad.
That's all right. I was getting a bit confused there. Yeah, firstly, I had a couple of comments. Shop Happy, completely support it. I saw some fantastic work on the stuff in Putney, lots of which was being done on cargo bikes and e-cargo bikes. Be delighted to see more of that happening in the Derbyshire Dales. Jeff Bezos, for example, has got significantly richer since the beginning of the pandemic. So if we can keep some of that money in the Derbyshire Dales, that would be fantastic. One of the other comments was about biodiversity net gain and the Environment Act, which is going through, and actually that we need to stop thinking about greenfield equals bad and brownfield equals good in terms of development, because some of the best sites that we've got for nature conservation and natural capital are actually brownfield sites. Not saying that don't develop them, but don't just automatically think that greenfield equals bad and brownfield equals good. And the other thing I wanted to say was about climate change, which isn't going away, and it's getting worse on a month-by-month basis. So, you know, we need to have that front and centre really in terms of the recovery, which it seems to be in the report. But I just wanted to reiterate that's a critical thing as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Cruz, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really welcome the report. It was great to read. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Welcome the Bakewell Road development. I won't go into too much detail here. There'll be further reviews, I know, on that. I would just request that project is as green as possible, you know, as carbon neutral as possible. We should really be pushing that as we go forward. Councillor O'Brien, the comments on the high value visitor economy, I think it's worth reinforcing that point that Councillor O'Brien's made around environmental tourism. There is a lot of potential there for us, and we do live in an absolutely wonderful place, and I wonder if we're tapping into that as well as we could. So I think there's further opportunity there. In terms of the green engineering, there are going to be a lot of engineers looking for activity, looking for roles, looking for economic ways of developing their careers. So I think it's something that there will be actually the skills. It's about tapping into setting up the entrepreneurial structure to enable that. So that's something I think will be really interesting to see how that develops. And then a couple of specific questions from me, please, to you, Steve. The shop appy sounds really good. And I don't know enough about its deployment plan, but it does sound like a quick win. It does sound like something that could help shops in Matlock quite soon. So I'd really like to know if that can be accelerated. How quickly can we get it to market? And my second question is around economic impact of the pandemic. In my own ward, I'm concerned about the economic impact on everybody, but in particular, potentially Hurst Farm. So I'm curious about the sensitivity of the employment prospects for residents in Hurst Farm, and if there's anything that we can do there to accelerate the regeneration activities to pull that through, to give it a bit more welly, so that we can help the community in Hurst Farm. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Cruz. And the environmental tourism is something that we have put a lot of store on in the past, and will continue to do so. I mean, for instance, the council has promoted cycling, not just through the White Peak cycle route, but by supporting in previous years the Eroica festivals as well. And certainly we've working with partners in the Peak Park, we've promoted cycle routes across the Derbyshire Dales, which people can come and stay in the Derbyshire Dales and therefore generate more money as well. And that's something that we'd certainly like to keep up. In terms of Shop Appy, the rollout is certainly targeted to roll out wider than the Hope Valley, ideally before Christmas. In doing so, they're trying to balance creating too many expectations. If they launch it before too many shops are signed up to it, then they'll get people having a look at it and saying, "Oh, there's nothing I want here," and going away and not coming back. So they're trying to build a little bit of momentum before doing a formal launch. But it's certainly something that is very much full on. Everyone's really keen to get it going as soon as possible. And in terms of Hurst Farm, I think I'll have to defer to my colleague Rob as the expert on the regeneration in Hurst Farm. But certainly as officers, we are in a way, it's one of those areas that cuts across everything we do in a bit like climate change cuts across everything that we do. And we're certainly talking about regeneration and jobs and boosting the economy. Hurst Farm is part of that as well. I don't know if Rob's got anything more specific to say on that, but you do make a good point there. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Buttle. Neil, sorry.
Oh, that would be me. Thank you very much, Chair. This is excellent. I really like it. I'm just a bit confused occasionally, though, because there's a really big report. There's a set of recommendations, and they don't seem to gel together quite as much as I like. I look at a recommendation and I try to find out how it's going to apply, and it doesn't. And then I have to go and find in about 10 different places where it is, and then I come back and think. So although it's fantastic and everything at one end is great and everything as good ends is great, I'm kind of finding it a bit confusing. So if we could look at format in future, so things sort of lead from one place to another, I'd love that. But altogether, I'm a massive fan. I think it's really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle Morley, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a few points, however, I shall be brief. Councillor Slack did allude to the fact that we would always have tourists. That's not necessarily the case. We know it's all a beautiful place, but we don't want them passing through. We need some multiplier effect from them when they come through, whatever village we're in, and it's not a given. It takes hard work to maintain that. And that's being done by Dr. Capes and myself as board members of the Marketing Peak District, Derbyshire. Other colleagues may or may not know that we're active in that regard. A couple of other colleagues did express disappointment and query as to how we were involved with maintaining tourism. and obviously increasing it as well. One other point I'd like to make regarding education and the qualifications, that I think it was Councillor Gamble that perhaps alluded to this. Yes, I agree with you. FE is fine, it's great, but they need the resources. They will have to have their resources changed and funded. And being from an educational background and a tourism background, it will take at least 18 months from the inception of a qualification to the actual writing the qualification and having it fully approved, let alone the resources that might be needed for plumbers, etc., to have the equipment to work with in reality. It can't happen overnight and things will take a while. I fully support the report. Steve, thank you very much. And there's a lot of detail, and also thanks to colleagues for their comments as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've just been informed Councillor Archer has joined us. Good evening. But you can listen, but I'm afraid you're unable to vote. I've got Councillor O'Brien, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to put forward an amendment to the recommendations. I'm having to do so because you've ruled that we have to accept the recommendations en bloc rather than take them one at a time. So I'd like to propose that we defer recommendation 3 pending further information from officers.
Okay.
I do this on the grounds that I explained earlier, and that I think we should treat all proposals for additional resources in the same way as we do from our partners in the private sector.
Councillor Gamble.
Yeah, I'd just like to second that for all the reasons Councillor Bryan again.
Well, we'll take a vote on that before the substantive motive. Councillor Flitter.
I think, Chair, I was going to speak and ask another question of Steve, but as the rules stand, I think we have to debate the amendment that we put forward. So I'll hang fire, thank you.
Okay. Have I got Councillor Purdy?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm satisfied, Chair, that our officer Steve Capes has given sufficient information on item 3. So I'm confident in our officers that to go forward and carry on with the recommendation. So I can't agree with Councillor Bryan's amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, okay. So, Councillor Flitter, would you like to speak now, or?
If permitted, Chair.
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah, it was just, I'd just like to support Councillor Burfoot in what you were saying about Bakewell Road in Matlock. I just got the feeling all week, actually, I've had the feeling that some of the new members think that this has been sprung on the district council. And in fact, we've been working, as Martin says, 15, I thought it was nearer 20 years on this. And a lot of good work has gone in, and public finance, private finance as well, in very detailed reports. And now we come into that head where it's not just making 12 jobs, it's regeneration of the whole town. And with this regeneration, we're looking towards more inward investment into the town. And I think that is an important point to bear in mind. The question I just had with Steve was, because Councillor Hughes mentioned the universities. Now, do we still have the business breakfast meetings with the local business people and councils? I remember going to, on behalf of the council, and certainly when I was in business, going to the Dome at Buxton, and it was a very good forum for business people to spend an hour in the morning chatting and looking at business as a whole. And I find it very helpful. Do we not still do things like that?
Okay, what can I just say? Well, I'll just allow that question as a final question on the substantive motion. So Steve will now answer that one, and then we are talking about the amendment, which I think we've discussed fully enough in the last hour and a half. I think, please, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll just ask Steve to answer that one from Councillor Flitter.
Yeah, yes, I'm happy to do that, Chairman. And you know, as you might expect in these modern times, breakfast isn't part of it, but we do still have discussions with businesses. Only a month or so ago, Paul led a discussion with a dozen or so of the Derbyshire Dales businesses, talking about, well, clearly the coronavirus impacts at that point, but we do at least annually have sessions with Derbyshire Dales businesses, at the moment via Zoom, but hopefully we'll get back to face-to-face in good time. Chairman, if I may, before you go on to debate the amendment, if it might help some members, it might not help others, but the recommendation 3 is there purely in relation to the team, the recruitment issues that are mentioned in recommendation whatever it is, about the recruitment stuff that we've talked about earlier, the boosting the team. The only reason it's there now is so that we can get on with writing job descriptions and recruiting people to the team before March next year, which is when next year's budget comes in. It would just give us a bit of leeway. If we can recruit some people before then, it would give us a leeway to do that. So that's the only reason for that being in there. But I fully appreciate if some members are uncomfortable with that and want to have a further debate. That's all I can add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Battle, do you want to talk on the amendment?
Yeah, Steve just answered the first question, which was, what did he imagine he was going to spend £50,000 on as part of the Economic Development Reserve? So yeah, that one's pretty straightforward. He's going to spend it on people to do stuff, which is good. How big is the Economic Development Reserve? I've never heard of it before. I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Chairman, thank you. Yes, it's a reserve that was instigated by Councillor Rose in the past, and it initially started off with, I think, 300,000 in it, and it has fluctuated up and down over that time. I might have to rely on Karen Henriksen to tell you exactly how much is in it at this point, but it's a reserve that was set up principally because we at that point realised as a district council it was either us or nobody was going to put money into schemes in the Derbyshire Dales. So it was something that members set up in order to enable us to pump prime initiatives for work in the district. I have now found paragraph 6.2 in the report, which says that the Economic Development Reserve currently has an uncommitted balance of £244,900. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, I've got Councillor Sue Ball, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, obviously, I was going to talk on the amendment to say, well, probably one of the things would be asking Steve about recommendation 3, but obviously just give us a full inclination to that. So as far as I'm concerned, I think going back to the original recommendation would be suffice. Thank you, Chair.
Right, now I think we will go to the vote now, please. Right, so we've got the amendment. Can I just have James just to read out the actual words? I think it's just to defer number 3.
Yeah, that's right, Chairman.
From the substantive motion. So if you want to, just for clarity and all those people out there watching on YouTube, this is for the recommendation 3 of the report on page 3. And a 4 means we defer the vote, and against, obviously, we don't. So I'll ask Simon to take the vote, please. Can you be on mute when you're not voting, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Allison?
For.
Atkin?
Against.
Bright?
Against.
Buckler?
Against.
Ball?
Against.
Martin Burfoot?
Following the explanation, against.
Please, can we just have for or against, please, members? For or against? It's very simple.
Councillor Sue Burfoot?
Against.
Buttle.
Against.
Chapman.
Against.
Cruz.
Against.
Donnelly.
Against.
Fitzherbert.
Against.
Flitter.
Abstain.
Froggatt.
Against.
Furness.
Against.
Gamble.
For.
Hill.
Against.
Hobson.
Against.
Hughes.
Abstain.
Lees.
Against.
Tony Morley.
Against.
Michelle Morley.
Against.
O'Brien.
For.
Purdy.
Against.
Ratcliffe.
Abstain.
Rose.
Against.
Shirley.
Against.
Slack.
Against.
Statham.
Against.
Sutton.
Against.
Rain.
Abstain.
And Wakeman.
Against.
Okay, so that is 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, sorry, 4 for, 4 abstentions, and that makes 26 against.
Thank you very much. So the amendment is not carried. Now can we move on to the substantious motion that's been proposed and seconded?
Before we do that, may I
Sorry.
put forward, Chair, before we do that, can I put forward a amendment about recommendation 3?
We've just had sorry, I was begging your pardon, Councillor Hughes. So what are you trying to say?
I'd like to put forward an alternative amendment to the one that was put forward about recommendation 3. The alternative recommendation, the amendment would say that the supplementary revenue budget to be approved for immediate revenue costs for the purposes of recruiting to the team of up to £50,000. So just putting in the purpose of this.
I think Steve's already outlined the purpose in that. I think for clarity, Steve, is that what you said earlier? Steve, where are you?
Yeah, yes, indeed it is, Chair. And you know, if members as a whole will be happy to have those words inserted, I will be too.
Are you happy, Councillor Purdy, with those particular words?
Yes, Chair. We'd like to get to the vote, I'm sure.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll add those to number 3. So if we could now go to the vote, please, Simon, please.
Just confirm, Chair, this is for the substantive vote, is it?
Thank you very much. So four to approve, it's been moved and seconded to approve the recommendations 1 to 7 on page 3 of our excellent report from Steve. Let's go to the vote, please. For or against?
Okay, Councillor Allison.
Abstain.
Atkin.
For.
Bright.
For.
Buckler.
For.
Bull.
For.
Martin Burfoot.
For.
Sue Burfoot.
For.
Buttle.
For.
Chapman.
For.
Cruz.
For.
Councillor. Thank you. Donnelly.
For.
Fitzherbert.
For.
Flitter.
For.
Froggatt.
For.
Furness.
For.
Gamble.
For.
Hill.
For.
Hobson.
For.
Hughes.
For.
Lees.
For.
Who's that?
Tony Morley.
4.
Thank you. Michelle Morley.
4.
O'Brien.
Abstain.
Purdy.
4.
Gary, I think you need to unmute.
Sorry, I said 4, but I got a frog in my throat. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Radcliffe.
4.
Rose.
4.
Thank you. Shirley.
4.
Slack.
4.
Statham.
4.
Sutton.
4.
Wayne.
4.
And Wakeman.
4.
Thank you very much.
Okay, 1, 2, that's 34 and 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much. So the motion is carried. We now go on to item 5, the sealing of documents. Do you propose that, Councillor Wakeman?
Yes.
Okay, and Councillor Sutton, do you second that? Just on mute. Let's go to Bakewell for that. You second that,
Sorry,
Councillor
second
Sutton?
that, second
Thank you
that,
very-
Chair.
Can I have a show of hands for the sealing of documents, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you very much. I said it's 20 to 7. We will resume at 7 o'clock for the second extraordinary meeting tonight. Thank you very much for your debate.
Excuse me, Chairman. Excuse me. I'll have to give my apologies. I've got
Fine, okay. Enjoy your meeting, Councillor Slack. Thank you. Okay. See you at 7, everyone. Right, ladies and gentlemen, 1 minute. I think is Jim there?
Can you confirm you hear me, Richard?
I can, Mark.
Thank you.
Yes, that's fine. Chair, we're still live.
Okay, we are still live, everyone. So just wait till it's officially 7 o'clock.
Can I hear you, Lewis?
No.
Have you got the sound on?
Lewis, we can hear you. Can you mute?
Yeah. Okay, it's 7 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Hope you've had a good break. I think we've lost Councillor Slack, but welcome you to the second extraordinary meeting to catch up with the other item that we didn't do at the last full council meeting. First of all, could I have the apologies, please, Simon?
Thank you, Chair. The apologies are Councillor McDonough, Pawley and Slack.
Okay, we'll just do the roll call again, please, as before, so we all know. We lost Andrew Statham up there. And
yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Okay, right, we'll do the roll call in alphabetical order, please. Simon.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allison.
Yeah.
Archer.
Here.
Atkin.
Here.
Bright.
Yeah.
Buckler.
Here.
Bull.
Here.
Councillor Martin Burfoot.
Oh, didn't hear that. Yes, here.
Sue Burfoot.
Here.
Buttle.
Here.
Chapman.
Here.
Cruz.
Here.
Donnelly.
Here.
Do we have a Councillor Elliott?
Absent.
Absent, no, okay. Fitzherbert.
Here.
Right. Flitter.
Here.
Froggatt.
Here.
Furness.
Here.
Gamble.
Here.
Hill.
Here.
Hobson.
Here.
Hughes.
Here.
Lees.
Here.
Tony Morley.
Here.
Michelle Morley.
Here.
O'Brien.
Here.
Purdy.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Raw.
Here.
Rose. Councillor Rose. I think we have Councillor.
Here.
Thank you. Salt.
Here.
Shirley.
Here.
Latham.
Here.
Sutton.
Here.
Swindle. Don't think we have a Councillor Swindle, do we? No. Okay. And Wayne.
Here.
And Wakeman.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so
Just
we've
the
done
absence, apart from the apologies of Councillor Elliott and Swindle.
Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, Simon. Okay, item 2, public participation. There is none. Item 3, interest. Nothing's been put before me or the committee team prior to this meeting. I take that as there are none. And now we go on to the substantive motion of this particular meeting, the Derbyshire Dales local plan review. And is it Steve or Mike going first?
Chair, it'll be Mike Hayes.
Right, Mike. Okay, yes, absolutely. So, Mike, I can't find you, but Mike, over to you, please. The Derbyshire Dales local plan review. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The report that you have before you this evening sets out that the District Council has a legal duty to undertake a review of the adopted local plan, the one that was adopted in December 2017 by December 2022. It sets out a timetable for undertaking this review. I think what members need to be mindful of in undertaking this review is that there's two parts to it. The first part is actually the District Council undertaking the review and then determining whether or not changes to the adopted local plan need to be made. If changes to the adopted local plan need to be made, then they need to be undertaken in accordance with the statutory requirements. Now, the completion of the review needs to be done by December 2022. Thereafter, there is no timetable set, and the advice is there is no timetable set for doing that. However, as you'll see in the report, based upon the experience that we had in taking the local plan through in 2016, 2017, we've set out a timetable which takes us through the review process being complete probably by the end of next year, and then the statutory process is then being undertaken and completed probably by mid-2023. The review process itself is split up into a number of different stages, but the first stage is essentially about evidence collection and making sure we've got the right evidence in terms of making sure we've got things like the right evidence on housing numbers, employment numbers, flood risk, infrastructure, those sorts of things, for which we are looking to appoint consultants. Indeed, a couple of consultants have already been appointed to do work on housing and employment needs as we speak this evening. The next phase after that is to then go through, look at the evidence, review the evidence, and then to determine what are our options going forward. As I've set out in the report, Chair, the key issues that we see at this moment in time are around housing numbers, the relationship between ourselves and the National Park, the effectiveness of our policies in relation to climate change, gypsies and travellers, and also in relation to infrastructure requirements. The report identifies for members this evening the proposed governance arrangements, which builds upon the work that's been done previously with the setting up of a new local plan working group at the annual council. And as I've noted in the report, these will initially probably be less frequent, but as we move through the development of the plan, then they may well become more frequent, and they may well have to be called at short notice to deal with particular issues at particular times. We've also been mindful of the risks associated with the preparation of the plan, and those are set out in the second appendix to the report. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Councillor Atkin.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is, I'm quite happy to move the recommendations as set out in the report. This is something we have to do as a district council, and I would say that some of our residents do actually welcome this review into our local plan. So on that note, Chair, I will move the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Tony Morley.
Yes, I'm happy to second the report as written, Chair. I've got a question, but then I'd like to reserve the right to come in afterwards, if I may. Could I ask a question of Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
For the benefit of colleagues who weren't around on the last time, the local plan advisory group put in a lot of work, and the officers worked extraordinarily hard to the point where it put you in hospital. A big focus was on the number of houses which we were required to put into our plan in order to keep the inspectorate happy. Do you foresee this being, not the heart attack, Mike, but the focus on the number of houses still being the same? Thank you, Chair.
Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The number of houses that we have to deliver going forward is likely to be an issue. The means by which we address that at the moment is changing. When we undertook the previous local plan, it was based upon an objectively assessed need of housing. This time there's a starting point of a standard methodology, and then we need to assess whether or not that needs to vary according to factors like affordability and employment and the impact of changing housing numbers on the economy and employment numbers. But yes, it will be a significant issue, particularly in relation to things like where the distribution of new houses might be going forward.
Very helpful. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I reserve your right to speak again, Councillor Morley. Councillor Mike Ratcliffe, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A quick comment and 2 questions for Mike. We've had a very good discussion, albeit in a policy committee, on a paper that was certainly not significant different from the one that is before us this evening. As is the case with all the work that Mike undertakes, it has been thought through in detail and very meticulously presented, as it
Sorry,
were.
1 second. Sorry, Councillor. Somebody's got a television on or something in the background.
Not on mine. It
Not in yours. Okay. Lovely. Okay, I beg your pardon. Please continue.
I'll proceed with the 2 questions then.
Yeah.
To what degree does Mike feel that there is an opportunity in this revised local plan for us to properly set a new green agenda with more defined climate change policies? For example, how much does he feel that we could imbue into our planning policies to strengthen the ability of this council to produce housing, develop housing with much, much better design qualities?
Well, there's 2 aspects to that, Chair. Firstly, in relation to the issue about climate change, and as I said in introduction, you know, it is going to be one of the key issues that we need to look at as part of this particular review. And one of the things that we'll be doing as part of the initial stages of the review is to look at the effectiveness of the policies. And clearly climate change has become an increasingly important agenda for the District Council. And what we'll be seeking to do is to make sure that the work that we do behind the scenes, both in terms of climate strategy and things like the climate change supplementary planning document, which we're working on at the moment, will form the basis of our potential approach to the policies within the local plan. So there are opportunities to address that particular issue, and particularly and in relation to the housing design side of things. You know, clearly, you know, housing design is a key issue, and it's moving up. Again, that's another issue that's moving up the agenda, particularly in light of the emphasis within the white paper and the government's approach to trying to ensure that development is appropriate for a particular area. So there is opportunities again there to ensure that we get a high quality design within the policy framework. That's not to say that, you know, we're not doing it badly at the moment, because, you know, one could argue that the policies and approach that we're taking are trying to achieve the highest design standards. I'm sure that John Bradbury would be sort of advocating that as part of any sort of approach from a development manager perspective.
Thank you, Mike. The second question, I've no doubt, having been on the previous local plan advisory group, that there will be contentious issues, not least of which will be housing numbers and allocations. But there is one issue that's staring me in the face from this paper, and I'd like to just elicit your comments. Why has the feasibility of a new village arisen again, given the overwhelming resistance that we saw last time? It was thrown out lock, stock and barrel. Why is it coming back again?
Right.
Chair, the report doesn't say that we are going to be looking at that. It's what the report does say is that in the event that, for example, the housing numbers suggest that, you know, we need to look very carefully at the distribution, then it might be something we need to look at as a way of addressing our housing needs. It's not saying that is going to be an issue. It's one that we have there as one that we think may need to be looked at in particular circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to prolong that question, obviously, but I thought we'd already undertaken all the analysis and assessment on this last time. There is just nowhere in this authority to build something of that size and demand.
Chair, at the last local plan advisory committee, we did look at what options were available, and at that particular point in time, no sites had been identified to the district council as being suitable, nor was there any interest from the developers in bringing sites forward in a new village context. Going forward, clearly we will need to think about what are the housing numbers that we need to deliver and where suitable opportunities might be to deliver those housing sites. And it may well be that we are limited with the scope of what we have. And it might be that there are opportunities. As you can see, I'm saying might be, maybe. It's only supposition that we might need to look at this. And clearly we need to have the evidence first before we proceed any further.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Councillor Flitter is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you know, I'm a sceptic of the local plan review, but it is something that we need to do. I must admit, I didn't read that about the new village in the same way that Mike did. And I'm glad that Mike offered that explanation, because that's exactly how I saw it. My two questions really relate to the extent to which the current policies will be accepted now and won't need changing. But in my experience, what I've seen is that we don't get a lot of choice when we're looking at national guidance and policy frameworks. There's not a lot of area for us to input local knowledge against the professional written word. So is there going to be opportunities to look at local knowledge and discuss the needs of the locality? And the second question relates to the consultancy advice that we may need. Now, in my opinion, the first two items, strategic housing and employment land, we have got very valuable staff there that can assess that. I understand that the whole local plan viability and infrastructure, flood risk and environmental assessment will back up whatever we put in this plan by professionals outside the authority. But I do think that we do have some very capable officers that could do this work without continually spending money. Perhaps we can have a view on that, please.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the first question about the ability for local knowledge to be included within the local plan process, clearly, there will be an opportunity for significant amounts of consultation with the local community as we prepare the plan. So there will be an opportunity for local views to be taken into account as we develop the options and as we develop the plan itself. So, as with the local plan previously, there will be a significant opportunity for people to engage. I think what we can do is reflect on the experiences we've had, Councillor Fitter, over the past few years in terms of the local input to particular issues across the Derbyshire Dales and the extent to which we can use that knowledge to complement the evidence base which we're preparing at the moment, or we're going to embark on over the course of the next few months or so. So I think local knowledge will be there and will be a significant part and an integral part of the process itself. In terms of the issue around the consultancy advice, we do have some very capable staff at the authority, but we only have a limited amount of staff at the authority. And to be able to do everything justice in terms of the preparation of the plan, we need to decide how we divide our resources up. And in this particular instance, we feel that it is appropriate to engage consultants to provide us with that advice across the whole range of pieces of work, so that we've got the right evidence to present to you as we take the plan forward.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor O'Brien next.
Thank you, Chair. I want to give some what I hope will be helpful advice. This is based on the fact that for the last 12 years of my working life, I devoted my time to supporting local authorities, some in this region actually, in turning their local plans from being ordinary and meeting government guidelines into being exemplar and being really excellent. So hopefully I do come with some experience of this, which I'll be happy to pass on to colleagues outside of the formalities of the council to support our work in the Derbyshire Dales. 2 points I wanted to make. Housing numbers are important and evidence is important, but housing numbers don't make good plans. What makes a good plan is that as members and as the public, we work out and we articulate what sort of places we want the Derbyshire, what sort of place and places, towns and villages we want the Derbyshire Dales to be in 5, 10, 20, 30 years time. And I'd urge those of you, especially on the local plan working group and also in the workshops that are being arranged, for us never to let that drop off the agenda. Don't spend all the time talking about housing numbers. Give ourselves time to articulate in our own language what we think will make any particular place successful and sustainable, what sort of environment we think we want in 30 years' time for our children and grandchildren. Don't feel the pressure to articulate that in planning language. Express it in ordinary language and then leave it to the professionals to translate that into planning speak. So I really leave that with everyone. You know, don't ever lose sight of the purpose of planning, which is to create successful places. It is not to build houses. Now, the second point I want to make is on the which I think Michael's already raised. This is the need to collaborate with the National Park Authority. Now that works both ways. I'm a very fierce critic of the National Parks planning policies, particularly in the housing aspect, and that, as far as I'm concerned, that has an impact on the rest of the Derbyshire Dales, and the wrong sort of impact. And collaboration works both ways. That's about them listening to us and us listening to them. Now, as far as I'm concerned, with the previous local plan, it was us listening to them. It wasn't them listening to us. So I'd really urge that dialogue is articulated at the highest level. It's a member dialogue. It's not just an officer dialogue. It's a member dialogue with the members of the National Park Authority, and I think that will benefit both authorities. And perhaps the Chief Executive might like to make a comment on that, because I know this is something which he's concerned about too.
We'll bring him in at some stage. Councillor Chapman, please.
Thank you. First of all, to Peter's final comment regarding the National Park. The National Park has two main purposes, and it's a statutory purpose that, number one, landscape was priority, the Sanderson principle. So planning the National Park is really dictated by that objective. what I'd also like to say is and really it sort of flows on, because if we look at paragraph 2.5, and I'd just like to make the point, we've got one of the bullet points of strategic flood risk assessment update. We want to look at this from a green point of view. We should be looking at the River Derby, which was obviously the cause of the flooding through Matlock a couple of years ago. The catchment area is in the dark peak of the national park, and we should be looking to cooperate with the people doing the work within that catchment area. And I'm sure my old mate and Green Party colleague Matt Buckler will agree with me with this. The answer to flood management lies not to Crete. It lies with restoration. It lies with reducing the flow, slowing the flow of water down through this whole valley. So I would like to think that any local plan review will take that into consideration and use the people working on that who have massive experience as part of that consultancy exercise. So thank you. That's my point.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Raw, please.
Just to follow on really from what Councillor Chapman was saying, I think for me, when I've looked at this, I think there's two key overarching themes that we need to be reviewing before we start looking at housing. And one of those is floods, and in partnership with that, obviously, environments. And I think we need to be looking at linking, as opposed to consultants, looking at local organisations that can help us with some of these work streams and some of these projects that are experts by experience in Derbyshire and aren't people that are brought in because of their consultancy expertise, but are brought in because they know the landscape, the terrain, and understand that. Because there's several different aspects, but I do feel we need to be looking at those environmental impact things before we start looking at where we can start to think about building houses or retail units. That's got to come first. They've got to be overarching, and those experts, rather than consultants, we should be putting out tenders to local voluntary sector organisations that can perhaps take up some of that work stream for us, as opposed to employing one specific consultant, is my thinking on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you, Chair. I spoke to Mr. Hayes earlier and thank him for the report. I did raise one or two issues. I just want to clarify. Just to put Councillor Chapman right, it was a year ago yesterday that Matlock was flooded, and in the last 18 months it's been flooded 3 times, and its residents and businesses continue to take the hit and basically the fallout for overdevelopment and lack of effective infrastructure planning and resilience. So will the first question to Mr. Hayes is, will the strategic flood assessment update itemised in point 2.5 seek local consultation, and will there be a generic or specific to each area? That's the first one. Do you want to take them as single or all 3 together?
Do all 3 now.
Thank you. Also around this area, there are also serious concerns regarding the antiquated and ineffective infrastructure throughout Matlock, and I'm sure without other areas for which the local plan will affect, namely Wirksworth and Ashbourne and other villages. Since I became a flood warden in Matlock, I've seen firsthand the lack of infrastructure that there is in Matlock town centre to cope with what it's got at the moment. Recently, the town centre has been gridlocked, and that is basically due to a serious issue with a sewage pumping station out towards Darley Dale. There's also been a serious issue in relation to a fractured gas main, which was actually laid in 1910, and that is still working today, although not effectively, obviously. I just want to know what assessments will be done to ensure any future developments, including those currently ongoing through the planning process, that will not exacerbate the Victorian already overloaded sewerage and drainage systems. Basically, I can only speak for Matlock and possibly a bit for Wirksworth, but our infrastructure is at capacity, and to keep building and putting more and more, sort of pressure on it, I don't think that is fair to the community. The final one is there a set protocol on how we can carry out the review process, or could the council, it's alluding to what Councillor Flitter said a little bit, or could the council consult with businesses and residents first to get a broad overview of their views regarding ongoing infrastructure and flooding issues prior to consulting with statutory bodies and the consultants that we employ? The latter of which may not have a great deal of knowledge, the consultants. I think that would be a good idea, because it's a way of checking whether what they're giving us is right, because Severn Trent, from my experience, will always say that it's achievable, but it's achievable at a cost to the community. And the report does state that there must be a review of the statement of the community involvement and what consultation will there be with our communities prior to the plan.
Thank you. So the 3 points there. Mike?
There are. Thank you.
It would help if I unmuted. So, yeah, in terms of the flood risk assessment, what we're asking in the first instance is for us to do, or for consultancy work to be done on an update of the strategic flood risk assessment, which is a level 1, which is a sort of a very sort of overarching flood risk assessment, which looks to try and identify, key issues that might crop up across the district. And what we've set out in the brief to the consultants on that one is that they also need to be able to identify to us where it might be appropriate to do level 2, which is much more site specific and localized flood risk assessment work based upon the outcomes of the level 1. So it's a 2-stage approach really, and the first bit is to look at and review and update the strategic evidence, and then move on where it's appropriate to do so to look at the level 2. And to a certain extent, level 2 will be influenced by where we think as an authority development might need to be directed going forward. So there's a lot of sort of, and I explained to Councillor Wayne at lunchtime, is that there's a lot of sort of issues that all need to mesh together for us to take on board. None of these pieces of work that we do are done necessarily in isolation of each other. They all need to come together for us to be able to look at and decide on what are our options going forward, taking account of all the evidence that we have provided. And that also includes the evidence that's on infrastructure as well. The first part of the brief that we've set out for the consultancy work on infrastructure is to identify what the capacity of existing infrastructure is across the board. And then again, depending upon the scale of development, to identify what gaps might be required to go forward. As part of the infrastructure commissioning work, the consultants that we appoint to do that will be required to talk to people like Severn Trent, Transco, and the various operators of the infrastructure across the board. So, they will be an integral part of that particular process. And as I said to Councillor Fitter in terms of the response I gave to him, we can use the evidence and the experiences that we've got over the past few years of working with the community and understanding the community's concerns about the infrastructure capacity and the issues around flood risk to enhance and add value to those particular pieces of work. And clearly, as members of the council, at the point at which we are preparing and finalising these particular pieces of work, as I said in the report, there will be potentially some workshops for members to engage with. At those workshops, the consultants will be open to questioning from members. So your representing your local community, and you will have the ability to be able to then, you know, scrutinise the evidence and put some of the comments that you may have in your head that may not have been addressed as part of that particular initial piece of work. So you can use that as a scrutiny mechanism to make sure that, you know, you're satisfied and we're satisfied as officers and members that the evidence is appropriate to take the plan forward. In terms of community engagement, as I said to Councillor Wayne, you know, we can use the evidence, the experience we've got, but the community engagement will come potentially once we've started to work through the evidence base and to work upon and identifying what our options are going forward, and then we can then go out to consultation on the basis that we understand what that evidence is saying, what our options are, and therefore the ability then for members of the community to then come back and say we like A, B or C, or we don't like B, C or D. And that's the approach we would take.
Thank you very much. Councillor Purdy, I've got next.
Thank you, Chair. Mike, what influence, if any, do you think the white paper on the planning reform will have on our local plan?
Chair, the planning white paper is a very high level piece of work that the government has sort of consulted on. The advice that we've received from the Planning Advisory Service and also that's now been advocated by the Chief Planner is that we as a planning authority should move forward with the review of our local plan because there's no timescale set for when the review of the system as a whole through the white paper process is likely to come forward. So my advice to you members is to carry on and take the local plan review forward as we're recommending in this report.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Buckler next. Matthew? Yes, you next.
Yes, sorry. I obviously agree with Councillor Chapman and would like to see green infrastructure in there. My question's about the recommendation 3. As part of the delegated authority given to the Director of Regeneration Policy, will the local plan advisory group be able to feed into that, or will that happen prior to the local plan advisory group convening?
Chair, the way that I envisage that working would be that if it was felt that it was necessary to commission work in the initial stages before any engagement with the local plan advisory committee or working group had taken place, then we would look to operate our delegated arrangements under that. Clearly, as we move forward with the review of the plan and we get more evidence and it becomes opportune, not necessarily necessary for us to undertake further work, then we will do that through the auspices of the working group. So that's how I envisage it working.
Okay, thank Matthew.
Yeah, so for example, Derbyshire County Council at the moment are undertaking a natural capital assessment of the county, and it would be good to make sure that we're looking at the things which come out of the work that other people are doing, as well as things which are coming from just which appear to be coming from us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense, Councillor Buckler, and clearly, as evidence emerges from other agencies do prepare their own strategies and plans, and we do take account of those as we're preparing the plan. What we're asking for here is more specialist advice on specific areas, but where we can do, we will draw in other strategies and plans that are appropriate for Derbyshire Dales.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you.
You need to unmute.
Sorry, I pressed it once and then it mutes again, so I'm sorry. Mike, I've got 3 questions. The first is about flooding and infrastructure at the sites where we're going to that we will identify as being development sites in the new local plan or the revised local plan. The second is about the duty to cooperate. and the third is about our priorities in assigning land use. And I don't know whether you want to take those one at a time or all three at once.
It depends upon the complexity of each one, Councillor.
Oh, they're not terribly complicated.
Do them all together.
Okay. Picking up on your point, back to Councillor Wayne, that infrastructure and infrastructure requirements and gaps would be identified at two layers in this new local plan, or the assessment would be done at two different layers. What I'm thinking about the output here in terms of the sites that are to be taken forward as development sites in the local plan and the revised local plan. Will there be a specification of the additional infrastructure for associated with flooding, sewerage, gas, electricity, etc., required to develop those plans produced as an output in this local plan, or will that be something that is left for later? I'm concerned because it seems that some of the development plans in the current local plan don't seem to have, and it might be just that I don't know about it, don't seem to have that sort of requirement associated with them. The second one about the duty to cooperate, the white paper removes the duty to cooperate with adjacent authorities as a requirement on a planning authority. I think a lot of people outside the national park view the housing load placed on the green fields around their towns, which reduce the amount of reduce access to greenfield sites locally, as a problem. And I feel that, as Councillor O'Brien said, this should be a two-way street. There is a requirement for housing, and the area outside the local plan, outside the Peak District National Park in Derbyshire Dales, is actually quite small in comparison with the total. And to take the whole load of housing from a proportion of the load of housing from the Peak National Park and placing it into areas outside the national park is of great concern to many of the residents in areas outside the national park. We do value the green areas around our towns and villages, and are concerned that they may be taken up. So I'd be grateful if you could comment on that, and Councillor O'Brien's point that it is really a two-way process to cooperate, and we do not really want to go in the direction of the one-way approach that was adopted in the last local plan. The third point is about the priority in development, and I lived in Buckinghamshire before, and in Buckinghamshire it seemed very difficult in lots of areas to build houses, but you could build workshops and offices at a drop of a hat. Whereas here it seems difficult to build workshops and offices, but houses, yes, you can build anywhere. What is the priority going to be in terms of land assignment, assigning land for jobs and high quality jobs, as we in the last debate we were concerned about, and assigning land for housing, which, when it comes to the sorts of housing developers want to produce, produces dormitory towns with people commuting as far as Sheffield and Derby, with the concomitant resultant carbon footprint that commuting has. So again, it's a sense of place that we need. Do we want dormitory places, or do we want proper functioning towns and villages in Derbyshire Dales? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. In terms of the three questions from Councillor Hughes, the first one is quite simple, really. We have to prepare what's known as an infrastructure development plan, and that is an integral part of the local plan process. We have one for this particular local plan, which sets out, what the schedule of development is, and how that links to the development we've got in the local plan. So I would envisage at this moment in time that we would have something similar going forward. There would be, development sites and locations, and then associated infrastructure requirements that feed off the back of the work that we're doing. In terms of the duty to cooperate, the white paper does envisage a situation where the duty to cooperate is removed. Unfortunately, at the moment, it still exists, so we will have to operate the review of the plan on the basis that the duty to cooperate still exists. The one dilemma that we will face with this whole issue is identifying the level of housing and then the appropriate location of those housing going forward. Clearly, the national park is a big constraint on us as a planning authority in terms of the ability to accommodate some growth, given the constraints that it has in policy terms and the protection it has at a national level. But if we don't provide necessarily all of our housing, we then have to, under the duty to cooperate, we have to start to have those discussions with our neighbouring authorities. Our neighbouring authorities, for example, Amber Valley, Derby City, South Derbyshire, etc., they are all in the same situation. They're all trying to find land to meet their own housing needs. So, I would envisage that there's going to be potentially, at the moment, there could well be, depending on what the numbers come out like, some potentially difficult conversations to be had, and also some difficult decisions to be made in relation to how we address our future requirements. Clearly, what we can't do is make sure that our housing requirements are unmet in any way. That's the issue that we're going to have to face. And clearly, if we do start to meet unmet need, or we do try to advocate a policy for unmet need, then we will get the developers and the like making very strong representations to us to say, you're not meeting all your needs, your plan isn't the right plan for the district, and therefore you've got to go away and start again, which is what happened in 2014, and where it led us to where we are now. So there are some difficult conversations. We will have those ongoing discussions with the National Park. I have to say, at officer levels, we have a good relationship. And clearly, if there are member discussions that can take place to try and advocate our case, then I would say that is an appropriate forum to take place as well. And I would support members doing that. In terms of priority land uses, I wouldn't say there's necessarily priority land uses. What I would say is that the priority for the plan would be to be ensuring that we're delivering sustainable development, and that's a balance of appropriate levels of housing and employment land going forward, so that we've got a sustainable community, and that the levels of population growth are accounted for, the types of nature of population growth which are forecast are taken into account, such that we don't end up with an imbalance in terms of our demographic going forward. And the second point that I'd probably want to make to that, and it's akin to something that was said previously, is that we want to try and make sure that the development does come forward is the highest quality to reflect the characteristics of the Derbyshire Dales.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Battle and then Shirley. Councillor Battle.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Mike. The existing local plans kind of goes on about future development, and I guess the next one will do that as well. But a lot of our problems are to do with the development that we've already had. The problem, we've got poor quality insulation, we've got oil-fired boilers, we've got gas elsewhere, we've got all sorts of things which are damaging to the environment. And a lot of the ways we behave are not helpful. Is there any way we can, when we bring this together, is there any way we can take a more holistic view, something with a bit more vision? I like vision; it's a good thing. I think we should have one. So obviously, Derbyshire Dales local plan's a great thing, and I want to bring it forward, but I want it to be ambitious. So I'd just like to sort of throw that in there, just to see if there's anything we can do about actually acting a little bit more retrospectively as well. Thank you very much.
Chair, the local plan is there to guide the district council in terms of setting up a policy framework for its decision making. It's about providing a framework for those situations where the district council needs to make a decision on a planning application. So where a planning application is required for a specific use or a particular type of development, then the policy in the local plan would apply. There are many instances where development that's required to improve the quality of existing development does not require the benefit of planning permission. So therefore, in those circumstances, the local plan policies would not apply. And indeed, the district council would not have any ability to be able to influence what happens in that regard. Saying that, Councillor Buttle is right that, you know, we need to set a vision, and we need to set one which is, you know, ambitious enough and capable of being delivered. We need to make sure that the plan that we put together is a deliverable plan. So we need to make sure that what we put in the plan is robustly tested. So, you know, we will look to make sure that as we bring the plan forward, that the evidence and the future recommendations of that evidence try to turn itself into a vision which is ambitious to meet the aspirations of the district council.
Okay,
thank you, Mike. I've got a second one.
Okay.
We've got quite a lot of shoulds in the existing plan, where we should do this, we should consider that, we should consider something else, we should think about this, we should look at biodiversity, we should do this, we should do that, or they should do this, they should do that. But there's no shalls. There's a shortage of shalls. People shall prioritise biodiversity. Can we do more of that?
Chair, with the local plan is the first port of call when looking at a planning application, and clearly what we have to be mindful of is the legislation which says that, you know, the local plan is the first port of call, but then we need to take account of other material considerations when looking at planning applications, and there is always going to be a balancing act which we have to address when determining applications. And in some instances, the use of the word shall might be offset by some other material considerations which might offset that particular requirement. So what we are going to be doing as part of the review process is looking at the wording of the local plan policies to make sure that they continue to be effective going forward, and making sure that they provide the right robustness in terms of the approach that the district council wants to take in terms of the decision making on planning applications in the future.
Okay, thank you. We've got Councillor Shirley.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got lots of suggestions as policies that might go into the local plan, but I don't think this is the time for that. But what I would like to advise is that I think as much consultation we can do with residents as early as possible, so that they can sort of see the plan developing. It may not obviously develop necessarily the way that everyone wants it to, but I think that would help transparency, would give people the opportunity to tell the authority what matters about their local communities, what makes their communities sustainable, and what makes them work. And I think that will take more people with you. It's always a bit, and also for that consultation to be sort of quite proactive on behalf of the Derbyshire Dales, rather than sort of publishing a document and saying everyone will respond to it. And in fact, most people perhaps won't notice it's been published unless that is their particular enthusiasm. You need to be much more proactive in ensuring that people know what we're producing, when we're producing, and how important it is to their communities.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Tony Morley, did you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think most of the things have been aired. I'm nervous about getting ourselves in a situation where we were before, where the inspectorate say, no, you don't have enough houses in your plan, so we are now going to impose things on you, and then we're then vulnerable to predatory developers, which happened before. Durbridge is overdeveloped, Brailsford is overdeveloped, and some of the villages in the south, and there was nothing we could do about it. So please bear that in mind, colleagues.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely debate. It's been moved and seconded. Can we go to the vote now, please, Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Allison.
4.
Archer,
4.
Atkin,
4.
Bright,
4.
Buckler,
4.
Bull,
4.
Martin Burfoot,
4.
Sue Burfoot,
4.
Uttle,
4.
Chapman,
4.
Cruz,
4.
Donnelly,
4.
Fitzherbert,
4.
Flitter,
4.
Froggatt,
4.
Furness,
4.
Gamble,
Abstain.
Hill,
4.
Hobson,
4.
Hughes,
4.
Lees,
4.
Tony Morley,
4.
Michelle Morley,
4.
There's also the National Trust
All right.
Farm at the top of the valley,
Somebody's
which
got a.
was being
Oh,
managed
one
very
second.
much
1 second.
natural way.
Somebody's got something.
Yeah,
on.
I have just say 4.
Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Bryan, if we could just have your vote again, please.
4.
Councillor Purdy,
4.
Ratcliffe,
Mike,
4.
Councillor Raw,
4.
Rose,
4.
Salt,
4.
Shirley,
4.
Statham,
4.
Sutton,
4.
Wayne,
4.
and Wakeman.
4.
so I think the motion is carried.
Yeah, that is, yeah, 34,
The motion
33
carried.
for 1 abstention.
So thank you very much. The motion is carried. Can I just say before we have the senior documents, I'm sure the council would like to send their best wishes to Councillor Pauly before her appointments tomorrow, and we also send our best wishes to Gary's wife Sandy, hope she makes is feeling a bit better. Thank you. Senior documents now. Item 5. Councillor Hill, would you like to propose that?
Yes, I'll propose it.
And Councillor Froggatt, would you like to second that?
Yes, Chair, I'll second that.
Thank you very much. It's been senior documents. Can you raise your hands, please? I think that's unanimous, please, Simon. Thank you very much. There will be an extra meeting that you'll be told about when the date is about the Bakewell Road project. But meantime, I'll see as many as possibly on, I think, Thursday night for the Bakewell Road workshop. Okay, thank you very much for your attention tonight. Members, I formally close the meeting.